Welcome in to the Baylor Spring Football Preview Show. I'm your host, Grayson Grunhafer, and we're just going to talk a little bit of football as just one of the best days, honestly, of the entire year is finally here. Baylor gets to start spring football. We get to talk about storylines, get to talk about different players, young guys who are maybe molding into the future of the Baylor football program. So obviously, it's always a fun time to talk some football during this spring. So we're just going to talk a little bit about some of the different positions, some of the storylines at those positions, and just some of the things to watch out for as spring football has begun. Obviously, Pro Day is at the end of the month. And then, of course, the green and gold game caps things off on April 23rd. Coming up in just a little bit, right on a month, pretty much, now that it's March 22nd. So let's start with the quarterback position. This is a position that everyone is going to be talking about pretty much all offseason. And it's the same conversation that everyone had a year ago, right? When Gary Bohannon and Jacob Zeno were in this battle throughout the spring, and everyone was talking about both of those guys. Who's going to be the quarterback? Gary Bohannon wins the job, goes out, has a great season. Baylor obviously makes the Sugar Bowl, wins the Big 12 championship. But the problem is what happened at the end of the year, right? Blake Shapin comes in, plays well against Kansas State, has a nice performance against Texas Tech, and then obviously one of the most memorable Big 12 championship game performances, especially in the first half before Shapin was injured. And that brings you to this quarterback conversation, this controversy, this battle. And so now going into spring, it's interesting. I think Gary is probably going to be the starter week one, and I think he's earned that, right? I think he had a very nice year, put some things together. Do I think Gary is amazing? No. Do I think Gary is a solid Big 12 quarterback? Absolutely. And so I think he'll be the guy to start the year, but I am interested in seeing what happens with Blake Shapin to start the spring. So he was dealing with that shoulder injury. He's gotten healthy. He went through the recovery period, has been lifting with the team, obviously. We saw him, squatting 500 pounds. And so I think it's just going to be interesting to see how much they give him to start spring football. Are they really going to throw him into the fire early? I don't expect that. I think they're going to be easy with him, kind of get him settled into everything and make sure that he's fully healthy before they start putting any kind of contact on him. Now, Gary, I think this is an important spring. He needs to make those same improvements he made last spring, this spring, continue to get better. There are still some things to work on. His timing, his rhythm, the touch on the football, those are things he really needs to improve on this offseason. And then that leads me into the young guys. Kyron Drones, can he take a big step this spring? Because he wasn't ready last year. And this year, he needs to be at least ready to where he could come in a emergency situation and go in and make some plays. He has all the talent in the world. He just needs to put it all together. And then C.J. Rogers, the talented walk-on, I think we're really going to find out, is this guy someone that could be a player at Baylor, or is he just a walk-on? I think that's something that we probably will be able to answer this spring, and if not this spring, probably in the fall. Moving on to the running back position, another position that is just up in the air, completely up in the air. When you look around, you see, Josh Fleeks has been getting carries there. He got carries last spring, and that didn't translate. So I'm curious to see if he's actually going to be involved in the run game. Two young guys that I really like, and two guys that I think fit the mold of this wide zone scheme the best, are Tate Williams and Jordan Jenkins. I think both of these guys show the power. They show the one-cut ability to get downhill, the speed to make defenses pay when they do get downhill. And while I loved Abram physicality-wise, power-wise, the guy was just terrific, and his burst was very, very impressive. But Tay and Jordan have much better long speed. So their speed continues to get better and better as they're running to where they can run away from a defense. Abram didn't quite have that. He was more of a power back, and then Ebner kind of showed you that speed at times. So very curious about, the potential of those guys. And then also, where does Quaylon Jones fit in? Where does Squirrel fit in? Is Squirrel going to be a guy that they can count on? Is Squirrel going to move to the slot? Could they move him around and use him in different ways? Very curious. The talent is there for Squirrel, but I just need to see it all come together. And I think we'll know more this spring. He should be healthy now. It should be his time to step up and actually make some plays for this offense. Moving on to wide receiver, another position where, it is young. It is so young and unproven, but the talent is all there, right? So Jaylen Ellis, Seth Jones, Jackson Gleason, it's time, guys. You know, they're the veteran leaders. They're the guys who really need to step up to the challenge. I think that at least one of them needs to cement themselves into a starting role. My bet is Jaylen Ellis. He was having an awesome spring last year until he got hurt. And that's kind of been the story with all three of these guys, just injuries or a lack of opportunity. Well, the opportunity's there now, and there's no more excuses. These guys have to step up to the plate, and I'm very curious to see if Jaylen Ellis can take that step into being a dominant wide receiver for this team because he has the talent to do that. Moving on to the younger guys, Monterey Baldwin, you know, what kind of growth do we see from him? When I look at this roster, there really aren't many slot receivers that fit this offense except for him. And so you look around, you go, maybe Seth Jones could play that role. Maybe Cameron Bonner is another guy, but I see a lot of outside receivers. And so Monterey really fills a need in this offense. The reverses, I think he could be a factor maybe downfield if he's able to be utilized in that way, if his route running comes together. Maybe he takes a step in the right direction there. But if not, then I think when kind of fall rolls around, that's where you could potentially see a guy like Jordan Neighbors, when he does arrive, maybe fill that role as well. So very curious to see how guys are, you know, kind of spread out from outside receiver to inside receiver, because at this time I see a lot of outside receivers and not a lot of slot guys. Some of the other young guys on the outside, Hal Presley, excited to see his growth. Armani Winfield, the freshman, you know, what does he look like on a college field? Is he really ready to be that guy? My bet is yes, but I need to see it. I think Hal is probably going to be the other starter in this offense. He actually got some playing time last year. He has a ton of talent. And then Javon Gibson, Josh Cameron, Elijah Bean, lots of talent in that room, lots of size, lots of speed, but they all need to come together, and they need to prove some things because this is an offseason with Dallas Baker that's going to be extremely important for this offense. Moving on to tight end, I'm going to make it short and sweet here. Ben Sims, Drake Dabney, know what you got with them. Tyler Henderson, you pretty much know what you got with him. But the young guys, Kelsey Johnson, Cody Madinka, they really need them to come together quickly and be able to play very quickly as well. They need to fill that role as a depth piece on this offense. Kyron Roberts-Day will come in the summer. So they're providing depth, but it's young depth. Kelsey Johnson could fill in that H-back role as early as this season, in my opinion. He has that kind of upside if things come together, if his weight gets to the right point as well. On the offensive line, there's obviously 4 guys returning, so it's pretty simple there, but the depth pieces are what I think everyone's going to be looking at. Micah Mascua, Gavin Byers, who's going to take over that open guard spot? Does Khalil Keith move inside? You know, I kind of hope not. I think he's really great at tackle, but he does have the ability to be just an absolute animal at guard as well. So I'm just curious how they kind of divvy up those positions and what they do with Mascua and Byers, who I do think one of those guys will be the starter next year. I'm also very curious about Tate Williams, curious to see kind of his growth. I still think he's probably a year away from being a starter, but I do think that he's getting closer and closer as his weight keeps rising, his strength keeps rising as well. Connor Heffernan, Ryan Lingyell, need to see growth from them. You know, one year to the next, it needs to be a continued progression in this offensive scheme. Moving on to the defensive side, the defensive line is set in stone. There's really not a lot to talk about there outside of just the intrigue of seeing what Jackson Player looks like. Can Gabe Hall be healthy all spring? That would be really nice as well. But they're just going to be dominant up there. I think we know that. Their 2 deep is ridiculous. They have so much proven veteran quality guys up front. It's just going to be exciting. I think they're going to be absolutely dominant on the defensive line. At the linebacker spot, this is where things start to get a little bit intriguing. You lose Trell Bernard, you lose Jalen Petrie at the star. You kind of got to figure out ways to get creative. You have Dylan Doyle back at the mic, so you're happy there, but at the other spots, the jack spot, you know, is Garmin Randolph and Matt Jones, are those going to be the 2 guys, or does Matt Jones have to move to the will spot? I hope not. I think he's a much better fit at the jack, the way his frame fits, but on the flip side, it's very hard to take Garmin Randolph off the field, I feel like. You have depth there, Tony Nyanwu, Victor Obi, but I think Garmin Randolph is a difference maker at the jack position, and so him and Matt probably going to split time unless they do decide to move Matt to a stand-up linebacker spot. So that's going to be interesting to see as well. Some of the other guys that are going to fit in there, I think Tyrone Brown, in my mind, I think he's going to be the starter at will. I really like the talent, the speed that he could bring to the position, I think would be just absolutely massive. Brooks Miller, if he's healthy, I think he'll have something to say in that will linebacker competition as well. And then, of course, Will Williams, a guy with just an athletic ceiling through the roof. But the question is, can he play that position at a high enough level? We will see. It's nice to have Dylan Doyle there. It's nice to be next to a veteran leader like that, but they need these young guys to step up and step up quickly. Also, just to mention a name that I'm really intrigued to see at the linebacker spot is Jackie Marshall. Where does he fit in? Where do they play him? Do they play him at the jack? Do they play him at the will? Do they move him on the defensive line? Just curious to see where his body has taken him this past offseason. Moving on to the secondary, the star position, I think this is Lorando Johnson's job to lose at this point unless Christian Morgan moves to that position, which I know a lot of people have talked about, but is it really going to happen? I personally don't think so. I think Lorando will do just fine at the star, keep Christian Morgan at the boundary, and then the field safety becomes just this wide open competition. Everyone would think Devin Neal, right? That's going to be the guy. That's going to be the other starter at the safety spot. But I'm not entirely sold on that. I like the talent in the room when you talk about Devin Lemire, Cisco Caston, Romario Noel. I just like the guys that are playing the field safety spot. And so I think it's going to be an absolute competition. I think you could see Devin Neal kind of play one of the other safety spots as well, kind of move around and be a Swiss Army knife back there. But I do think that there are still some open opportunities for reps for some of these young guys to potentially steal a starting spot at the safety position. Finally, at cornerback, the biggest question mark, I think, on the roster is who's going to start next Al Walcott. We know what Al Walcott can do, but what can these younger guys do? Mark Milton is back. I think most people will say, oh, Mark is probably going to be the starter. I'm not buying it. I think Mark Milton will come in and be exactly what he was this year, but I think they're going to find a younger guy who will start opposite of Al Walcott. Now, my guesses would be Tevin Williams or potentially A.J. McCarty or even Reggie Bush. I think Reggie Bush is a guy who's poised to have a massive spring. I think you're going to hear a lot of articles about kind of his ceiling this spring and what he's brought to the table because athletically he fills a need and he fits the mold that they want at that cornerback position. But right now, my guess is Al Walcott, Tevin Williams will be your starters at cornerback with Reggie Bush, Mark Milton, A.J. McCarty, Chateau Reed providing that depth at the position. I also want to just say at the secondary, I think there are a lot of questions as far as what position are Alfonso Allen, and Devin Bobby, what are they going to play? Well, you know, where do they fit in this defense? Are they going to play the star? I think one of them will probably fit in at the star. Could one play field safety? I'm especially looking at Devin Bobby. I think he could end up playing that position. He has the speed and range to do that. Mike Harris, what position is he going to play? We haven't gotten to see him in a while. I'm very curious at where Chris Miller's clone is going to play. Mike Harris looks very much like Chris Miller on tape to me. So that's pretty much it. That's position by position. Some of the things I'm looking at, some of the things that are very intriguing going into Baylor's spring football practices this year. It's going to be a lot of fun, and they're going to try to repeat as Big 12 champs under Dave Aranda and Sugar Bowl champs potentially as well. So I will talk to you next time, but this has been a spring football preview with Grayson Grunhafer on Sic'Em365.com.